Hey everyone, and happy Thursday. Welcome to Charlotte Inno's virtual State of Innovation event, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Quick reminder that the attendees are on mute today. If you have any questions for our panelists, drop those in the chat box and we will get to answer those at the end of the event. Today we're going to chat through the concept that startups, like all organizations, have a responsibility to encourage diverse hiring and cultural practices within their company, as well as ensure employees of all kinds, especially BIPOC, members of the LGBT community, and women are included and integral to their startup success. In our discussion, we'll tackle the best ways for small companies to put this into practice, what kinds of questions leaders in the startup world should be asking themselves, and how company leaders can play a role in making Charlotte a better and more inclusive community, as well as how we can make sure these best practices become proactive instead of reactive. For anyone unfamiliar with us and what we do, Inno is part of a growing network of sites. We're currently in 14 markets, and we're committed to covering and connecting local technology, startups, growth, and innovation. We're so glad to have you all here today. We love to know, is this your first Inno event? We're about to launch a poll for you. Charlotte Inno covers the local ecosystem via daily stories, a twice-a-week newsletter, and quarterly events that are all virtual for now. Check us out at charlotteinno.com to see what we're all about, and sign up for The Beat, our twice-a-week newsletter. The Beat is really the best way to stay plugged into everything that's impacting the local innovation economy. In it, you'll get the local tech and startup news you need, analysis you won't find anywhere else, information on upcoming events, job openings, and so much more, and it all happens in a fun conversational manner. Before we get started, I want to give a big thank you to founding and supporting sponsors, City of Charlotte, EY, and Dual Boot Partners for making this event possible. Before we kick off, I'm going to pass it over to Todd Yolo of Dual Boot Partners to make a few remarks.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. I'm super excited about the panel today. For me, diversity has been kind of a personal journey. You guys are probably surprised, why do they have the middle-aged white guy doing the introduction? But I'll tell you, over the last number of years, I used to be one of those people that said, well, I accept all people. There's not an issue. And being friends with several people, including the gentleman you're about to speak today, Mike Metcalf, has really opened my eyes to there is still a lot of work that needs to be done. My wife is also a woman entrepreneur, so I see firsthand sometimes the struggle she faces. I have two daughters too. So it's really become a personal mission for me to hopefully be a bridge or a facilitator to help with some of these discussions, as well as open any doors for anyone that may feel like they're not at the starting line where they need to get to. So I'm super excited about Jocelyn, Dr. Williams, and Mike Metcalf today for them to be a part of this. Like I said, I know Mike personally. He's broken down a number of barriers among my friends. He's done an amazing job, including he was the first, I believe, African-American board president for the Charlotte Rescue Mission. So I'm excited for you guys to hear their stories. I encourage you to be open-minded, and even if it's not happening to you, things are still happening out there in the world. So please take the opportunity to learn, discuss, and see how we can help with diversity. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Todd. And we've got the poll results. This is the first Inno event for 61% of the attendees on today. Thank you all so much for joining us for the first time, and we hope that you'll enjoy today's event. And for everyone else who has hopped on for an Inno event before, thank you for coming back today. Now it's time to dive right into our panel conversation. Today I have with me Mike Metcalf, the co-founder of Deck Leadership, Jocelyn Kung, the founder of Flurix, and Dr. Shantae Williams, CEO of Black Pearl Global Investments. How's everyone doing today?
Excellent.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for hopping on. I'm just going to start real quick by kind of going around the horn and having each of you give a quick introduction of yourselves and what you do, and we'll start with Mike.
All right. Hey, I'm Mike Metcalf. I have been in the motorsports industry for 15 years. I'm a player coach currently. I am in charge of the pit crew department at Chip Ganassi Racing. So coaching, recruiting, training, hiring for 4 Cup Series pit crews. It's about 25 people. And then also co-founder of DEC Leadership. DEC is an acronym for diversity, efficiency, culture, and kindness. We feel like those are pillars that all leaders need to have. And so we're really passionate about that. We do a lot of team building and leadership development here in the city of Charlotte, but we're kind of getting out in the country now because diversity is in such demand. So a little bit about me, I'll say more later.
Thanks, Mike. Jocelyn?
All right, thanks, Elise. My name is Jocelyn Kung. I'm currently a software engineer at Passport, which is a local transportation and payment startup in Charlotte. Besides that, I'm kind of an aspiring professional disc golfer. It's kind of taken up a lot of my time during quarantine, so I highly recommend it if you're looking for an activity to learn. And then I'm also the founder of Flurix, which is Charlotte's first technology conference for women and non-binary folks as well as allies. So to Todd's point, while our goal is to support women, it's also equally as important to have those allies there learning and growing with us.
Awesome. Thanks, Jocelyn. And Shante?
Dr. Shante here, CEO of Black Pearl Global Investments, which is a healthcare venture fund. We invest around the world, Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean, and we deploy our technologies in urban and rural America to solve healthcare disparities. Super excited to be here. I also act as an angel and private investor in things beyond healthcare, so I'm super excited to be here.
Thank you all. We're going to dive right into the questions. Mike, I'm going to shoot this one over to you first, and then we can kind of go around. What kinds of questions should leaders in the startup world be asking themselves, and how can those questions become action items?
Yeah, so racing is in the sponsorship business, right? Part of how we function and operate is due to other people wanting to use us as marketing platforms. And you're having a lot of people now say, okay, show us your board of directors, show us your executive team, show us your leadership group. And if that group is not reflective of the clientele that these people have, they're out, you know, and it's just an easy, it's an easy equation, you know. And so I think the question is like, who are we serving? Who are our client? Who are our end users? Are they reflective of where the world is, you know, come 2020? And if not, what are we doing to get there? And then I think the question is for everyone is like, how can our company be the global standard for diversity and inclusion, right? I mean, what are we going to do to raise the bar so that when other people see how we do our business, they're inspired, they want to follow that lead?
Definitely. Do either of you want to chime in and add to that?
Yeah, I'll just jump in and say 100% agree, but then also start looking at not only diversity, but inclusion. So what I see a lot of leaders do is say, oh, we should just hire a few more people. And those few people end up sitting on an island by themselves because people think they came into the diversity arm of things, or they hire a diversity and inclusion VP, and then that's the end of the story. And so, you know, diversity doesn't work without inclusion. And so making sure that you have that participation in all facets and all levels of decision making, and making sure that you're not leaving those diverse candidates that you bring in sitting on an island once you brought them in the door, because that's not enough to really create the environment for people to grow and thrive.
Absolutely.
Sure, and just one more thing to add to make it a little bit actionable is to look at your data metrics and your recruitment and retention pipelines, like of all the applicants that you're getting, like how diverse is that pool of that population of the people that are getting interviews? What does that look like? And are you already starting to see like some trends there? And then once they're in the company, like look at who's getting the promotions, pay equity, things like that. So I think data doesn't lie.
All really fantastic points. So yesterday, the Wells Fargo CEO issued an apology for his comments that there's a lack of diversity at his bank because there is a limited pool of Black talent. This is an excuse that many startups and tech companies, not to mention just companies at large, have used to justify their actions. In your opinion, how can we eliminate that excuse and mentality? And Dr. Shante, we'll start with you.
Well, I'll say I love what Jocelyn said about the data not lying. However, the data can be misleading because a lot of times he can make that comment if he looks at his current pool of employees and then says, oh, well, we only have a few people. So clearly, my hypothesis is there must not have been anybody that could get through to this point. And so I think first and foremost, we have to be much more intentional, and we have to let go of this bias that the reason why women aren't in certain places, the reason why minorities aren't in certain places, because they don't exist. You don't find things that you aren't looking for, ever. So there has to be an intentionality when we look for employees or candidates. And I always get the immediate pushback, well, the best man or the best woman for the job is who will, rise to the top. That's just not the case. If you don't have a ladder to get to the top, then it doesn't matter. That's why he felt so self-assured and confident in saying that, but it's because he started from a premise that they didn't exist in the first place, which tells me not only do they have a cultural problem within Wells Fargo, but they have a networking issue, right? That means they couldn't look across the street to a different bank, and companies poach from each other all the time. That means he didn't know any other bank that was doing anything that was really innovative in pushing up women or minorities or diverse candidates in any way. His network across the board is limited. And so they've got to do a much better job of expanding and really coming full circle and saying, where are we circling? Because this isn't working. Let's go somewhere else. Let's change the numbers up. Let's look at our pool in a different way and change how candidates are being stacked up. And, they may find that they have those ingrained, check the box kind of metrics. And, oh, we interviewed a woman, but she wasn't going to make it anyways. That kind of mentality, they've got to get all the way away from that. So I hear it a lot. I see it a lot, especially on the venture capital side of things. We assume that if there aren't more people raising $1 million, it's because they didn't deserve it. And I find that's just never the case. So I hope he really gets his act together and he gets a better HR team and a better team across the board that will really tell him, hey, wait a minute, if we don't have it here, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist either in Charlotte, which we have a large Wells Fargo employee contingent, or in New York, or in London, or in Africa. Like, literally get out of your bubble.
I completely agree with Dr. Williams. To get to new ideas, you have to ask new questions, right? Like, old thinking won't lead to new ideas. And so when I see stuff like that, my instant thought pattern is like, well, why is that the case? Why is there a limited pool of Black people? Is that true? And I can think about when I started in a NASCAR profession 15 years ago. I told friends of mine, Black, that, hey, I think I'm going to start in a motorsports career. And they were like confused. What do you mean? Black people don't do racing? Like, what do you, that's not for us, And it wasn't that I didn't have the talent or the ability. And several of these friends should have started with me. They just didn't, because they didn't necessarily feel welcomed. There's an awareness piece there. There's an educational piece there. There's a proximity piece there. And all these things play into the fact that roll into recruitment, right? And we can do recruitment much better. We have, like Jocelyn said, there's so much data and metrics right now. We have access to anybody, anywhere. If we wanted them there, we can make it happen.
Just to kind of follow up on that, I'm sorry, Jocelyn. Why do you think that those things aren't being done? If the ability to do it is there, why aren't people doing it?
So much of business, especially in a city like Charlotte, which is kind of banking focused and even tech focused, so much is follow the leader. It really is. And so, one of the things that I get when I come into businesses, as a Black guy in a leadership role, I'm young. And so it's like, all right, well, you want to do a presentation or workshop, who all have you done this for? And if I haven't done it with people in that sector that they can compare themselves to, I get no call back. Doesn't matter if I'm talented, doesn't matter if I have more and more unique stories in the area, you know. And so I think a lot of it is that once people can start to see like, oh wow, this Wells Fargo is starting to branch out. Okay, they must be learning and evolving. And then it tends to kind of trickle. And so I think, you know, we need more action, right, from our leaders, and I think others will follow.
Great.
Yeah. Jocelyn, were you going to say something?
Yeah.
I was just going to say I'm very passionate about this, kind of dispelling this whole myth of like the pipeline doesn't exist. Because when I was launching Florix, I actually I had an interview with WBTV, like local Charlotte news, and to tee up my segment on the news, they played a clip from 60 Minutes of this expert that was saying like the reason that women are disproportionately represented in technology is that they simply don't exist. That talent doesn't exist. And then they flip over to me, who of course, like, you know, fresh out of college is saying something else, right? But I'm living proof. Like the talent exists. I studied environmental science in college, and I'm thriving in my job right now. So to the Wells Fargo CEO, I would say you need to change the checkboxes that you're looking for.
And it seems like some folks think that a lack of diversity is more forgivable, perhaps on startup teams, because the companies are just so small inherently. You know, they're just getting off the ground. There's really no HR department in some cases. How can people really push back on that idea?
I would say if you can view diversity as an asset rather than a handout. Again, pointing back to data and research, time and time again, it shows that diverse teams are more innovative, more successful. Don't you want those things for your company, especially when it's in such a fragile state?
I 100% agree. And I would also just say that when we think about diversity on small teams, that's when it can have the greatest impact, right? So think about technology and healthcare. If you're designing a camera to scan skin and everybody on your team is white, they may not, you know, it may not trigger in their brain, hey, this also has to be able to scan darker pigmented skin or skin that has more melanin in it. And then you miss an entire customer segment and you create a product that doesn't work for, you know, a customer base. And so on those small teams, again, it comes back around to, as a startup or as a founder, you should be networking, period. And you should be networking with everybody because you have no idea who's going to really, you know, help push you forward. And if we started looking at it like that, instead of saying, you know, oh, we need a Black one, we need a woman one, and, you know, we've got a white male. And, you know, and if we stop doing the check boxes when we think about diversity, and diversity comes in gender, it comes in age, it comes in race and ethnicity, it comes in all kinds of forms. And I think that's where people have to, you know, really expand what they're thinking about as far as diversity, because it really means it's a lot more than just ethnicity or gender.
So I work in Nascar. You know, when Black Lives Matter started trending, one of the guys came up and said, can you help explain to me what Black Lives Matter means? And I was like, it's lives, Black Lives Matter. It's like, oh, okay. So I'm dealing with like some of the far reaching people that you could possibly imagine when it comes to this thing. And what I've learned to do is just try to bring it down as simple as I can. And diversity for us is strength. It's no different than a stock portfolio. You know, how many has a stock portfolio? Probably everybody. Is it diversified? Absolutely. Why? Because when one sector's down, the other one's up. And diversity is strength, it's wholeness. And if we can think about it in that regard, we can kind of get away from this like, oh, here's diversity meeting. Oh, here goes the neighborhood. That's not it. It's actually making us more powerful. Right. And so for us, we have a team acronym. It's diversity of thought, experience, age, and motor. And if we have time, I can dive into that. But in 4 years, when I got to Ganassi Racing, it was a department full of white dudes, 30 of them. And now we're the standard. We have the most colorful pit crew department in NASCAR's Cup Series history. But it wasn't that we went after color. We just removed the barriers. We got rid of biases. We knew we didn't have all the ideas. And so we wanted people with different thoughts and experiences at the table, thinking that, you know, maybe they can know something or have been through something that I have that can bring answers and solutions that I can't bring myself. And so, and it just so happens that as we opened up our eyes and our doors and our arms, it started getting more colorful, and it's been beautiful.
How did that kind of progress? You know, who, and you know, you don't have to name names, but who kind of got the ball rolling on making that happen?
I mean, I did.
Okay.
And so I'm a black guy in racing, and so I could see like, okay, well, that's a dumb tradition. You know, a lot of people and kind of this follow the leader. You know, a lot of it's tradition, but some traditions need to go, and some traditions no longer serve the core values and the mission of what we really want to accomplish. And right, and so I started coming in and changing things, and I was like, well, what if I could get more people like me? And not necessarily black, but just more people that saw it through different eyes and lenses that could come in and see how much more powerful could we be. And it takes, you know, it takes a few people to partner with you. People thought we were crazy. There's no way they're gonna let all you guys in here in this sport. And I was like, it's not about that. It's about excellence. It's about hiring people with character and class and work ethic. And it doesn't matter what they look like or where they come from, you know? And so I'm always liken it to it's like, it's not turning around a jet ski, this inclusion conversation, especially when you get to inclusion and equity. It's not a jet ski, it's a cruise ship. It takes time, but just because you don't see it going in the right direction doesn't mean it's not turning.
Definitely. And so when we talk about startups, we're not just talking about founders, we're also talking about service providers like bankers, lawyers, consultants. What is their role to play in creating a just startup economy in Charlotte?
I think it's what Mike said, you know, just is what are the traditions? I find, in coming from the clinic in an academic setting, the best question is, but why do we always do it like this? And that asking that question and listening to the answer, generally the answer is like, I don't know, you know, and you've got to dig and dig and dig and dig. And if you start asking that question, then when you get to a bank, for example, and you look at underwriting standards, or you look at the assumptions tied to a specific industry or a specific founder, or, you know, you start seeing, you know, some numbers are, you know, the way they are because they are the way they are, but also you just start to say, okay, well, why don't we historically, you know, invest in a first-time business owner that's got property, that's real property? We generally do underwriting on that, but why is it that the first-time founder becomes all of a sudden the world's riskiest thing in the world? Got to start somewhere. You know, there is a step one. You know, I think a lot of folks start to think, oh, you got to start at step 100. When we think about you know, lawyers, accountants, consultants, it all comes down to saying, okay, do I have an area of expertise? How can I lend it? But how can I lend it so that person grows? Not necessarily just for me to grow and build a clientele. And startups just touch so many, you know, various areas. And what I'm finding when I work with startups now is they hear such crap thinking. You know, so many times over and over and over again, just bad answers, just bad suggestions, just, you know, really, and it starts to narrow their creativity. So I would implore everybody who's going to be in contact with a startup, tell them the truth, not necessarily just your opinions, because your opinions are also formed on some other level. And I like to ask myself, why do I think that? You know, why don't I like X, Y, and Z? And so if we were able to really get more of the people who touch startups in a different way, they may support more of them, but then also our founders and our startups won't be so beat up by the time they get to the one voice that is, you know, ready to hear what they've got.
I was on a call with Elevon is a credit card processing company. And one of the main guys that does hiring on the corporate side was just, you know, after a conversation, it was a diversity training workshop thing. And he was like, you know, it just occurred to me that I can, because I'm in hiring, I can actually make a difference, you know? And I think a lot of people think that, you know, it's like, man, there's so much, this is such a big conversation. Can any one person make a difference? And furthermore, could that one person be me? And I would say yes. You know, as starting, when you're starting something, if you kind of weave into the fabric of who you are, that, man, we're just gonna look different. We're gonna have everybody at the table, and everybody at the table is gonna have a voice, and we're gonna have training at the start so that we talk about biases that exist. We don't know what we don't know. Half the things that have come up in a lot of these conversations, people are like, I mean, I had a guy at the race shop the other day stop me. He was like, I just went right fragility, and I'm not sure if I'm a racist or not. And I was like, you know, the fact that you read the book and you're thinking about it gives me hope. You know, it gives me hope that you're now starting to think about things that you've never questioned. And so if we can question more things, if we can just assume the responsibility that I can make a difference, we can go a long way.
All right.
I'm having issues hearing Elise. We can't hear you.
We can't hear you, Elise.
Mike, what was the name of that book again?
12-second culture.
Okay.
So
How about
that's a good pit stop is 12 seconds. So it's like, it's about what goes into being able to have these moments where you execute under pressure at a high level when it matters. And so, yeah.
Awesome. I got a new read now.
Oh.
Sorry about the sound issue there.
No worries.
Before we move on to the next question, did anyone else want to touch on what we were just discussing? All right, awesome. So founders of color know that lack of diversity and inclusion is an issue, yet the issue is compounded when those founders eventually speak up and then find themselves trapped into only speaking about diversity instead of, you know, their own work. And all of you, I'm sure, have been in that situation. Or worse, you know, made to sign NDAs or blacklisted even by certain organizations. So what are some resolutions to that problem?
Well, I'll say this, and I won't belabor the point. It's on both sides. One, I can say wholeheartedly, I now turn down more speaking requests than I do, because if I'm going to be put in a box, that's not a box I want to exist in. So I always tell, you know, anybody in this space, you know, be your own best advocate. Advocate for your community, advocate for everybody else around you. But when you start seeing that trend and you become the only one they want to talk to, and it's only about the problems, you can do one of two things. One, say no, you know, and move on to the next opportunity, or get into the interview. And at least you're a reporter, so you probably hate this. Tell the story you want to tell. No, you know, you are not under lock and key to say anything that someone else wants you to say. And I've turned conversations to what it is that I wanted to address. It's probably very annoying to the reporter. However, it is something that is necessary to happen. And then I will say, if you find yourself blacklisted, or, oh, here comes the race card, or whatever people kind of drum up, you know, I feel like when I tell people, be okay with being blacklisted, because trust me, if they're willing to exclude you because you spoke up for yourself, it may not be an environment you want to be in the first place. And it shouldn't squash your voice. It shouldn't quiet what you say to people. It should really mean that, you know, okay, I must have said something so profound that, you know, it's under their skin and they don't know what to do with it. So say it again and again and again and again. Is always my advice. Now, I know that takes a lot of bravery, but then I'll say on the flip side of that, people who are not, you know, not a person of color, or not a woman, or not, you know, non-binary, I would say stop tasking the folks that are oppressed with solving the problem. They didn't create the problem. And if you stop putting the onus on them to solve the problem and speak up about the problem and identify the problem, I can say, even in a city like Charlotte, we know what the problems are. We've known what the problems have been for 20, 30, some odd years. They really haven't changed. The person speaking about them has changed. And so stop requiring conversations and start putting some actionable items towards how you move things forward. And if we have that conversation across the board, then I think we may get a little bit further. And not when I say conversation, I mean having an actionable conversation, because roundtables are great, but if there's no follow-up, if there's no activity, then it's just not as valuable anymore.
And kind of playing off what you said, Dr. Shante, about, that when you do interviews and you have to tell the story you want to tell, I mean, as a reporter, sometimes that makes the story better. As a reporter, I don't always get the answer to the question I expect to get, and you and I have spoken before, on diversity. But when the person you're interviewing tells the story, their truth and the story that they want to tell, it ends up being the better story.
Good. Hopefully it's not too annoying, from me at least. I know I do it all the time.
So two things came to mind for me with this question. The first is, so Florix is a conference, and I have a big role in selecting our speakers and also kind of curating the topics that we have. So I guess just a challenge to any other organizers that are out there, like, we just need to do better. It's great to have D&I topics covered, and they absolutely should be, but make sure that, the tech talks that you have, the, more substantial talks, that those are also well represented. And I'm proud to say that that Florix is very representative on that front, and that's because it was a priority from day one for me. And then the other thing is, like, if the platforms are restricting you to a certain narrative, I think one thing that we can do to help each other out is, like, it can be a little bit, awkward to brag on yourself, but shout out people that you see that are doing great things, like lift them up on LinkedIn, like someone just launched a business or hit a big milestone. Create more platforms for people of color and minorities to thrive.
I got nothing to add. The ladies crushed it on that one.
Awesome. Kind of switching gears a little bit, what are some wins that you've seen or even accomplished yourself recently? And Jocelyn, we'll start with you.
Sure. So on that note, one of the sponsors of Florix, the person I was coordinating with over at Empowered Benefits, which is a small, like, healthcare related startup, she was in their HR department, and shortly after the conference happened, I found out that she quit her job and launched a bookstore, which was her dream this whole time, was to sell books. Wow. It's called Shelves Bookstore, and I've been monitoring her sales. Like, it was kind of awkward timing to launch during, like, a pandemic, but happy to say that she's thriving. So definitely check her out. And that was just a really cool story. A Black-owned business, woman-owned business. I love reading as well, so all things that really resonate with me.
Dr. Shante?
Well, I would just say I love Shelves. And I did know the story, but I do love that company. And I would just say I'm going to speak directly to my industry, and something really cool that's happened. I will say NC IDEA and their Black Entrepreneur Council. But if you take a look at that council, start looking at the people on that list, there are some really cool companies on that list, and I happen to have been interacting with them in a granular way. For example, Desmond Wiggins, who is in technology and is just kicking it, just kicking butt, I'll say, for family-friendly audiences. But he's one of the people that I like to shout out because he's an alum of my undergrad, but also because he's young and he's from the Caribbean, and He's making waves and thinking how to be innovative and how he can be innovative. And I remember meeting Desmond before he started his company, and we worked together and collaborated and started talking even before, you know, he had a company or an idea. He went all the way to China and back, and I had happened to intersect with him right before that. So for me, I'll just say my personal success now is tied to all the people that I've been able to touch over the last few years as a funder, whether I'm writing a personal check or a VC check. And it's really started to just create this compounded effect that's really made my career much easier, because I don't have to have the pipeline question anymore. I can point people to everywhere. So.
And Charlotte is really represented on that council, that NC Idea Council too. I mean, I think there's 7 or 8 people from Charlotte, which is just fantastic.
Yeah.
Mike?
So when I started racing, you know, sorry for all the racing stories, but I think they apply. The first year, the team that I was with, when Charlotte, there's 4 crown jewel races: the Coke 600, Daytona 500, and Brickyard, and then championship. And if you win those, you get a ring. It's a nice big championship ring. And our team won the Coke 600. There's about 20 people on the crew that year. Everybody got a ring except for me. No explanation for that. Accused of anytime something went missing, it was accused that I stole it. I remember going up to see our HR lady one day, being on the executive wing, and the president sees me walking by. I was like, hey man, we don't need drugs up here. And so when you're in this environment and you have to just kind of like take that kind of stuff for years and years and years to get to this year and see NASCAR have a moment of listening to stop a race to do that, and then to go a step further 2 weeks later and ban Confederate flags, it's a massive win because I know where it came from. And so the thing that I've been telling other people, like, man, if NASCAR can make these changes, it can happen anywhere, because I know how deep it was, right? And so, you know, if there's anyone on the call that has deep ties to Confederacy, this isn't an attack on you. It's an invitation to something deeper, into something better for our country, and a future that maybe would be a little bit brighter for my kids than it was for me. And some of the things I've gone through, I've lived through being pulled over for no reason and having guns drawn. In those moments, you just want to go home and see another day, because I've seen this story play out so many times. And so, and I get tired of it, you know, and I, and there's a lot of hurt and pain that comes up when I see these things happening on the news. But, you know, I think the fact that people are talking about it, that people are still talking about Breonna Taylor, that there's memorials and protests still happening. That's a win. It's a huge win. Spent a lot of time with Bubba Wallace and some of the other drivers. Like, hey, we've got to do better. NASCAR has a chief diversity officer now, and there's a think tank, there's a task force, there's pipelines. We're reaching out to HBCUs now, because so many of them have amazing engineering schools, but there's no engineers in NASCAR that are minorities, which makes no sense, you know? And so just to begin those conversations for me is huge. And I'm so grateful for where we are right now. Still have a lot of work to go, but I'm really grateful for it.
Can we get you a ring though, Mike? I feel like that hurt my feelings.
It hurt my feelings. I saw the ring. One was ordered for me. It had my name engraved on it, Metcalf. It was, I don't know. I don't know where it is.
It kind of seems like, you know, with all the heaviness of this diversity conversation, that it can sometimes be hard to keep those wins in the front of your mind. So why is it so important to all of you that you're able to think on those wins and the positive side of what you're doing?
You know, I've got people in my family that were, you know, worked on plantations, that were not allowed to work. I mean, you know, military people that fought in World War II, my grandfather, only to come back home to North Carolina and not be allowed to eat in a restaurant with the same men that he sacrificed his life for. And so I think about them having dogs put on them and being shot with water hoses and things like that. I haven't had to go through that. I haven't had, I mean, I've had some experiences, but I haven't been beaten, you know. I haven't had dogs, I haven't had the water hose deal. And so in some regards, the baton that I have to carry is just a little bit different. And it's a little bit lighter, to be honest. And I focus on that. And if my baton is that I have to be tired and that I have to be careful when driving my Lexus. And, you know, man, these are better problems than they had 50 years ago, I can promise you. And so, so I'm okay with that baton. And again, like I said earlier, hopefully the one that Jocelyn and Shantae and I pass along, maybe it's a little bit lighter for our next generation.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that sentiment. There's so much work still to be done despite the progress that we've seen and continue to have today, that I think if you let yourself get in that like moment of despair and not be hopeful about the future, like I'd rather be part of the solution, even if it does take more work, and definitely have hope that, you know, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, that the world looks a little bit better. Or a lot better.
Yeah, or a lot. I think the game I'm in, I'll call it, the game I chose to play is the VC space, the entrepreneur space, the startup space. There's a lot of failure in this space, even under the best circumstances. And it's a long-term game. I mean, across the board. So one thing I definitely had to do was redefine what winning means. And winning really means, for me, everybody winning. It's Jocelyn's friends, it's Mike in NASCAR. It's winning is taken on a very different tone for me, because I have to be able to look across the street or across industries, or, you know, and say, oh my gosh, they're doing it. You know, we can do this too. And it's keeping those wins and holding on to them and just using them as the fuel that will get you to the next, you know, the next level, the next destination is so important. And so for me, I've definitely hit a point where now I'm celebrating everybody's wins. So, you know, even, you know, I've had people say, well, did you invest in that? Nope. But their win is my win. And when we talk about diversity and inclusion, one of the ways in which we'll kind of hit a tipping point, if you will, for monies coming into companies or people not feeling like diverse founders are riskier is as soon as we have a blockbuster IPO that has a really diverse team led by, you know, a person of color or a non-binary person, the entire industry will start flooding in because nobody wants to be left out. So all of those wins for everybody else does come back to you. And so wins just, for me, it means something different now, but it also means that you know, I have a saying, if you can just hold on one more day, you never know what's going to happen. And so that one more day, especially in the entrepreneur startup space, is just so important. So hold on to the win, whether it's personal or whether it's somebody else's. Get to that next day.
That's such a great mindset to have. And Jocelyn, you mentioned, you know, that you have hope, and that just honestly kind of leads me into my next question, which is, you know, who or what gives you hope?
Sure. So I moved to Charlotte about 4 years ago, didn't know anyone when I moved here, and I've just been astounded at how supportive the community has been. Both like from a personal level with Florix, like how much buy-in I got from corporations of all sizes, from the community, like selling out this conference when I had no proven track record. But just in general, like seeing how much traction the Black Lives Matter movement has gotten locally, people launching like social media campaigns and websites to curate Black-owned businesses, businesses that are struggling during COVID. You know, people just lifting each other up, even if it doesn't necessarily benefit themselves. And even if you've never met this person, just seeing that, like, that strong sense of community for innovation in Charlotte has just been so inspiring, and I love being a part of this city and this growth.
I've got 2 young kids, a 3-year-old and a 10-month-old, and they give me hope because kids are just kids. They just play. They're simple. They don't really see, they would never think to see color as like a disadvantage or a way to describe somebody. In our book, we write about how I think the skin is the largest organ. It's like 10% of our body. And there's 3 layers. And of the 3 layers, the smallest layer is the one that has pigment. And then of that layer, pigment is like 18%, which makes color roughly like, it's like 0.005% of our body. But yet we use that little teeny thing to drive so many narratives, and we're more alike than we are different, right? And so, and Mike, and I've gotten to the age where like I don't think it's possible for people to understand that, but then my kids teach me every day that no, we're born to treat each other and to love each other with equality. And so they give me hope, and as I want to protect that for them, and I want them to see a world that where we do this for each other, So that's what gives me hope.
That's awesome. I don't have children, but I do have a nephew who's 15, and his first job actually was at my venture firm. And he was making if I had made the money he made as a 15-year-old, I'd be on a totally different track in life. But that gives me hope, because one of the things that I see with him is this expanded mind of possibilities. When I was his age, I worked at Denny's. Not there's anything wrong with Denny's, but I was, I didn't know what I didn't know. And so as he gets older, and he's been sitting next to me as a judge on startup pitch competitions probably now for the last 2 years. So at an early age, he's got this expanded mind, and I will say, he asks questions that are well beyond some of the other judges and myself sometimes. So he's got this expanded view of the world that I didn't have, and the worldview that I had, my parents didn't have. So that for me gives me hope that we're just continuing to move in the right direction. Just everything that he's wrapped into just inspires me, and maybe one day he'll be gracious enough to give me a loan when he's a multi-billionaire.
That's so awesome. All right, so we have one audience question. Given the current infrastructures built on white male supremacy, how much should marginalized communities, entrepreneurs, other professionals with influence try to change the existing structures versus building their own? The existing structures require that the white male patriarchy give up their privilege, which is an obstacle that is hard to overcome.
That's a heavy question. I will start by saying I don't think it's either or. I think I always operate in 2 sectors. One, yes, I'm happy to have a seat at the table and try and change those structures and infrastructures internally. But that seat has to come with a voice. It can't be, representative, So I think you need people working on the inside, just like you need people who are building stuff on the outside. And ultimately, what should happen is the people on the inside are making the point, and the people in that infrastructure are starting to see, oh, the people who built their own thing, they're also extremely successful. We got to work with them. And I think that becomes more of a, it's both. We need both things. We need safe spaces for folks to grow and thrive. We need people working on the inside. But ultimately, I think we have to get away from it being, I gave up my privilege. Before we started talking in the terms of privilege, people are like, oh, I just got it because I deserved it. Great. Then think that everybody deserves it. Everybody's working hard. It's for me, it's like, if we stop looking at the game as zero sum, if we win and he has to lose, our mindset that we change in that way is not zero sum, because the pie is expandable. And the people on the inside are working to dismantle structures and are gaining allies, and those allies are going to be important for the people who are building their own infrastructures and tables. But that's just my perspective. I'd say I've been told that's a bit naive, but I think we need both parts operating at 100% in order to make lasting change.
Yeah, I would agree. We say at our place all the time that a rising tide lifts all ships. And so it's important for us to try to bring the tide up for all of us. And I was just thinking like how much I'm enjoying this conversation because I'm on a screen full of women, and it's usually white dudes. And so, but you know, the thing that I think a lot of people want to do is like, all right, I'm excited, I'm learning, I'm passionate. Let's hire more Black people. Let's get more women. Well, you want people that are qualified to be there, right? And so, you know, I've seen people put a Black person in charge of a cultural officer and fail because they didn't have the resources and the tools and the support that they needed. And so I think it's important for us that are entrepreneurial, that want to get in spaces and make change. It's okay to learn from people for a little bit before you branch out. Kind of like what Dr. Williams is saying, like take your time. We need both. And until you're ready to kind of really take some cracks at the infrastructure, maybe it's good to just park under somebody for a while and learn what that infrastructure actually is, so that when you do launch, you're more strategic with it.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't change what you don't know.
Exactly.
Absolutely. We actually just had a couple more audience questions come in. You've mentioned corporate environments and how people might start the diversity work and conversation, but shouldn't there be that dialogue that starts before we even get to the work environment? Should companies be looking at helping to change the landscape at the K through 12 and collegiate level?
I'll say something real quick. I mean, it actually has to start before that. It's got to start in the home. It's got to start at the dinner table, family reunions, like long before. I mean, they say in life more is caught than taught, right? And so we can teach it all day, but kids are going to catch what they see in parents and mentors and in the world around them. And so if we aren't doing a good job of that, being inclusive, being equitable in our conversations and in our thoughts and experiences, then it doesn't matter what we educate or what kind of training we do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. You gotta, you know, yes, we should be teaching, you know, the subject matter, the history, but the reason why, you know, focusing on the corporate culture is because those attitudes do come home. You know, those leadership discussions do come home. Those that job that pays more does go home and changes, you know, those symphony tickets or whatever. They come home and they demonstrate the change in infrastructure. So it's not just, oh, we hired a few more people. It's if you have your coworkers over for dinner party, you know, who else is at the table as a coworker? Who you're bringing into the circle with your kids at the dinner table? So I 100% agree that one of the reasons why it's important to teach, but it's also important to work at a level that's, you know, that's really scalable, in my opinion, is because it's those micro interactions that end up leading to the change. Because, you know, a lot of people say you can't hate somebody that you know. And if the more of those demonstrations and experiences that are out there, because they flowed out of the infrastructure or the system, if you will, I think the better. So I would say, again, it's not either or. It's not, should we start here or should we start here? It's everywhere, because we all are interacting, whether we're in the office or whether we're at home. We're going to cross paths in the grocery store or somewhere else. And the more of those interactions that are shown and demonstrated to be equitable, the better.
Yeah, I love that. I will say, at least for technology, and I think this applies to most industries, just the role models are so important. Like seeing what you can become is so impressionable when you're a kid. So part of that could be from who you bring home, who they get exposure to. It could be, you know, giving them books. Like, what books are you reading to your kids? What is the skin color? What kind of occupations do they have? In the stories you're telling, everything matters from what they see. Just both from how inclusive am I thinking? How do I view other people? But also, like, for my own aspirations, what do I want to be in the future?
We have time for one more audience question. This one isn't necessarily diversity related, but she asked, are there any suggestions for organizations, education, or social activities to help 6 through 12 students, so grades 6 through 12, who are very entrepreneurial, things like competitions, curriculums, apps, groups, things like that?
Well, I'll just jump in and say startup weekends. If you have students that are, interested in, say, startup weekends or are really great for that, they're put on by Techstars. I believe there's one coming up in, I think, October. It's up in Winston-Salem, but it's an awesome opportunity for 2 days for someone younger to come in and interact and build a company and technology from the ground up and get that experience. Techstars does a lot here locally as well, and they've done some of those programs with Johnson C. Smith, bringing in the same curriculum and helping kids work. And I will say also, CMS has done a much better job of creating and launching business courses. And those business courses actually touch community people. I know I've come in and spoken to groups and classes, and they do projects. So maybe look at your school's curriculum and say, is there a business course or an entrepreneurship course that my kid could take, and that gives them this exposure into a whole new world?
I'm a little bit biased, but I think that everyone needs to learn how to code, or at least understand how it works. People need to dive, the younger generation really needs to dive headfirst into technology. And there's so many resources, both online, a lot of them are free to learn those things. And then if your student prefers a more in-person or hands-on approach, there's organizations like Code Ninjas, Dottie Rose Foundation, In Tech Camp for Girls, you name it. Feel free to connect with me if you're having trouble finding one. There's so many resources.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for being here with me today, for sharing your insights and your experiences. And a big thank you again to our founding and supporting sponsors, City of Charlotte, EY, Dual Boot Partners, for making this possible. I do also want to give a big congratulations to all of the entrepreneurs and young tech leaders who made Charlotte Inno's under 25 list. Jocelyn is actually included on that list. It's live on our website, so be sure to check that out if you haven't already seen it. One more thing before we hop off today. One of the reasons we've been ramping up expansion lately is because we've learned that the more markets we're in, the better we can serve our local communities. If you're a logistics company here, we can now connect you to the logistics-focused VC firm in DC or Atlanta or Chicago. If you're working on blockchain here, we know the blockchain accelerator in Charlotte or Austin or Tampa Bay. Beyond telling great stories and hosting great events, we're also in the business of making connections. So please reach out to us if there's anyone local or in one of our other markets that you'd like to meet or learn more about. We'll do our very best to make that connection for you. And like any growth company, we rely on user feedback to get better. So if there's anything you want to see more or less of, please let us know. Thank you again for Jocelyn, Mike, and Dr. Shante for being here with us today. And we'll see you at our next panel. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Elise.